All right, guys. So this week we're going to have a kind of different way of organizing this call. So this week I will make several questions that I want you guys to answer. So please try to stay on topic. Otherwise, don't take it personally or the wrong way if I have to interrupt you, because I'm sure we'll start getting too excited and getting into questions that I'm going to ask later on. So during this past week, we've been hearing a lot about when will kids go back to school, when will people be able to go to work again, when will businesses be able to reopen. However, it's still not certain when will all this take place in each country and region. Is it in a couple of weeks, in a month? And even if businesses are able to reopen soon, when will people start traveling again? When will airports start having more traffic? So because there are so many unanswered questions, it's a very tough job to be prepared for the future, or at least just one possibility of a future. Therefore, in this chat, we're looking to go through with you what are the possible scenarios for your hostel and your market and how to best prepare for them with the current information at hand. So I don't know how many of you guys noticed, how many of you are in the WhatsApp group for the hostel community. But before, when this all broke out, Dan from Hostel had created a strategy before they closed the hostel. And so he had different scenarios according to their occupancy, and they had a strategy to take with each possibility. So he had said, like, if their occupancy is it's at 0%, they close. If it's between 0 and 40%, they try to have the hostel mostly automated with self check-ins, streamlined expenses, have no or low staff costs. Also between 40 and 70%, they have like a middle ground where they will put partial reception hours. They have some shifts with staff, evening events, and between 70% and 100% occupancy, they'll keep business as usual. So as you can see here in this example, Dan had also set some triggers so that they knew what to do next. So that's what we want to do together with you. So run through possible scenarios, plan for them, and pay attention in order to know which plan to take and when to put it in action. For example, what if the government implements minimum distances? What are you going to do? How are you going to organize it? What if the first ones to travel, even within the country, are families? How do you target and cater to them? So it's about this planning that we want to talk about in this chat. So again, I'm going to ask some open-ended questions. Feel free to jump in whenever you want. If you start going like a bit off topic, don't mind me stopping you and putting that side note for later on in the conversation, okay? So starting off with the first question, for those of you that still have their hostel open or that already opened the hostel, what is your current situation and how are you managing it? So just unmute yourselves and go ahead. Don't be shy.
There might not be anyone open.
Yeah.
But
all right. I guess I need to break the ice there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we decided to keep open everywhere we could, which means that pretty much all our hostels are still open, but very, very limited, except for La Paz, where we had 2 hostels and we just minimized that into 1 and moved everybody into 1. Currently, we have between 0 and 10 to 15 guests in each one of the hostels, in each one of the 5 that are still open. But even the ones that have 0 has a few of our staff, and some of the staff are travelers as well. We do have a few local staff that decided to move in with us as well, but very small amounts. And pretty much we have no local staff coming daily to the hostel to work.
Sure.
So Yeah.
Sorry, it's just we're already getting asked, but everyone, when you speak, if you could introduce yourself of where you're from, because it's going to be
Oh,
relevant
okay.
to their market.
Yeah, for sure. So,
Yeah.
Dror from Loki Hostel.
Drawer, you're muted. Yeah.
All right. Sorry, somebody muted me. Oh, I
That was
don't know
me,
how I did
actually.
it. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. So, Dror from Loki Hostels, South America, Peru, Bolivia, and Argentina. I hope I wasn't muted all the time before. Did you hear me before? Okay. All right. So yeah. So like I said, we have 5 hostels currently open. All of them are losing money. We have a very small amount of guests, and we hope to keep this situation till we can open more. Um, we are looking now at probably 90 to 100 days till we can start doing that in Peru, which is the only country that actually gave any indication. That's pretty much it for us, I think.
Jor,
So
do you have any?
probably nobody else is open.
Sorry, Jor. First of all, my bad. I was trying to mute myself when I muted you, and then I couldn't find you to unmute you. But can you tell us about how the situation? Like you talked about the revenue, it's not really covering costs. But is there any measures, protective measures that you're taking? What's the feel you're getting from the customers that are there? Do they feel protected, unprotected? Do they care? I think this is it's going to be a good indication of what hostels that are currently closed will expect when they reopen. So if you can give us some insight on that, that would be great.
All right. I don't really know how much of a representation it will be of what happens when we open, but pretty much we have big bars in each of the hostels. There's big spaces and there's courtyards or gardens or pools in some of them. So like, there's a lot of space for people to be in, especially when it's only 10 people or 15 people in a place that is meant for 200 to 300 beds or 200 300 guests. I think that at the beginning, there's a lot more emphasis on washing our hands, being careful, going in and out, with being very careful with what we do. I think it's a little bit more relaxed now. People don't go out nearly at all. We can only go to the shop across the road pretty much to buy stuff or go shop around the corner. So there's not many options to go out. And we play games together. We do Spanish and English classes for some of the people. It's a bit more like a big family than anything else. I don't know how much this will be an indication to what will happen when we start getting people that only come for a day or two. I think that's very different.
And have you had any cases or suspicions of coronavirus in any of the hostels?
No. Okay. Yes, I think I mentioned that in the group before. Earlier in that period, like I think like about a month and a bit ago when this just started, we had a guy that anybody was in his room with him asked to move because he's constantly coughing and was sleeping all the time. But he's just smoking so much weed that we actually forced him to stop smoking so we can actually see if he's sick or not. But that was the only case that there was any fear.
Okay, I mentioned it because I think I could join this conversation a bit about hostels that are open. I was recently talking to one of our hostel friends that will not be named that have about, let's say, 15 people roughly in their hostel. And they're long-term guests. So, I mean, they're people that are kind of, let's say, quarantining together and just as if you were in like your own family home, but with 15 people. And somebody who went back home was able to go back to their country, I forget which country, was tested and was given positive for coronavirus. So at that point, it was obvious that everyone in the hostel, or not everyone, but the hostel had coronavirus in it because the person that just left was diagnosed with having coronavirus. So I talked to this hostel and we were running through what should be done or what steps they can take. This is something that I think is different now when we're in quarantine than what we're going to be discussing when we're able to go out and start just having some semblance of a normal life. because in this case, the hostel is really confined to a quarantine together. And it was about saying, okay, well, now if all of these people, no one's coming in and out, but these people, we can just suspect and treat them as if they have coronavirus. And it was really important to, of course, make them aware of it, ease them to, not to create a panic or anything, but we knew that this could happen. This has happened. And that's where we talked about, for example, doing groceries and communal dinners and limiting people going out or not allowing them to go out, having an external person bring in the groceries, everyone chipping in for groceries, and then it's one person that cooks the dinner. And so nobody's really going in and out. And a big topic of conversation was about the viral load. I think I've mentioned this in our past call, I think, that it's important to know that the more time someone is in contact with the virus, the more likely they are to have severe conditions or a more critical condition and require healthcare. So it's really important to, even if we know that, or we think, or can suppose that everyone in the hostel is infected in this case, it's still really important to limit how much contact each one has with the virus so that their own immune system can fight it off, create the immunity without being overloaded with contact of the virus. So there still was, we discussed, for example, we talked about not having the buffet style dinners, having people serve it, not, like people not going out to the grocery stores, instead having someone bring it in, having regular hand washing, even though, you're quarantined in your own place. And even though you think, okay, it doesn't matter if I infect somebody because they're already infected, again, it's about how much contact you have with the virus. So washing hands, face masks, things like that, to limit the amount of contact you're giving or exposing other people to. So I think it is something important to bring up. It might be relevant once we do get out of quarantine in our own countries and start opening up our hostels, what to do if somebody is known to be infected with coronavirus in order to protect the rest. Sorry, that was kind of maybe going off topic, Beatrice, but if there's anyone else that has a hostel open and what their current situation is, speak up now or we'll move on.
I just want to mention one thing. We are not receiving any new guests. We're just having the people who are currently in quarantine staying in the countries. We have considered that earlier in about a month ago, a month and a bit ago, and decided that that's too risky for the people who actually trusted us to keep them safe.
Okay, good to know. I see a Jason unmuted. Is that because he wants to speak? All right, so I'm just going to assume that everyone else is not open.
Yeah. All right, so for the rest of you who are closed, when do you expect to be able to reopen? And by this, I mean, are you going to reopen as soon as the government allows it, or is it in just a date where you already have reservations, in a date where you already need to have your staff back? In which situation is it? And how will you reopen? Will you have staff reductions? Will you need to have your full staff back again? How will it work?
Pamela.
Okay. Hi everyone. Once again, Pam from Spanky Meat Hostel, Zagreb, Croatia. So as far as I know, we don't have an exact time. Like I said, the bar will be 11th of May. Hostel, probably in June. But again, we are not sure, like not that we're receiving any reservations or like nobody like canceled and stuff. But we're trying to see maybe some partner reservations soon might happen. Hopefully we'll see. But what I wanted to say was more about change for now that happened. Like we gave up PMS that we were using because they didn't want to, help out. So we just managed to go from like 200 euros to 10 euros spending. The staff at the reception, one is stuck in Argentina. That's probably going to be for a while now. So the others, we're going to cut housekeeping and laundry service. Both of those were outsourced. So basically now, if we're willing, and we're literally gonna do like housekeeping and reception and laundry here at the hostel. We're gonna try to organize for start. That's the beginning. And for the general staff, since we're not just a hostel, we decided to take measurements from the government. That's why we were all were able to come back from being fired. The problem with that is they tell you that you have to employ back all the people. So this is for like 3 months, and now we'll see, because we have a lot of staff. So it's not really, if you know what I mean, like in the meantime, we have to earn for all these paychecks, and there are like a lot of us. So we'll see. But for start, that's kind of like what we did over here.
Pam, sorry, if you can tell me again about the 3-month thing with the government. So the government allowed you to lay off people and they're supporting their wages for 3 months, or?
I'm sorry, I'm sorry I wasn't maybe clear on that, because I'm also not super clear on that. But basically, like how we had over 150,000 people go unemployed in a couple of days. And here you can get some unemployment money, right? But of course, it was too much for the government. And of course, businesses going out of business. So they decided to do this, that you can apply with your staff. You have to list everyone for 3 months kind of support. So basically it's minimum wage, but the government pays that. You don't pay it. But one of the conditions is that you have to keep that whole staff once you're back in business. I mean, sorry, that was maybe important also. Like, so if you continue your business, you have to bring all these people back. So as a worker, of course, this is great. You kind of feel protected. But as a business, it's like, what if you don't go back? How are you going to pay this people's paychecks? You can't go from, oh, I had 20 people, now I'm going to have 5. So we'll see.
Yeah, so that's actually a perfect subject for discussion, because every country is different. I know in Spain, for example, there are measures that you can, I'm not sure how to translate it into English, the system that they call it, but you can kind of, it's like claiming a state of emergency of your own business. And so you are allowed to lay off people until you get back on track. So you can still be open. It's not all or nothing. You know, it's one thing I understand in Croatia, it's either everything or nothing. But there's some situations in some countries where they can start back little by little and reintroduce the staff also little by little with this emergency plan. So I don't know if anyone else has kind of, you know, this kind of plan in their country. Benedita?
Hi, Benedita from Lisbon, Portugal. Here in our country, we can apply for this layoff. We pay 1/3 of the wage, and the government pays the other 2/3. But you can only let go people, the staff, 2 months after finishing this layoff. So if you have this layoff, people start to, when the layoff finishes, the staff starts to work, and you can only start to letting go staff 2 months after this. So it's not that bad.
But my question, Benita, is when you do decide to bring some back, you have to bring back everyone at once, or you can bring back little at a time, like just like bring back one person, bring back another.
It's not clear now for the moment. So government is still.
That's what's going to be really important, because if you find yourself with 10% occupancy, it'd be good to be able to bring back one person and have reduced staff hours. But if you have to all of a sudden have all 15 people back on board.
I know that we can ask for some staff being on layoff and some staff not. So maybe it will be possible to take someone out of layoff. But for the moment, layoff is only allowed for 3 months. I don't know if they are going to open an exception for tourism. They are starting to talk about it now. Right. But generally, we are only allowed to have staff on layoff for 3 months only. And we are not going to open in June for sure.
Okay. Well, I think it's really important that everyone informs themselves. I know that it's not always clear, and like all the countries are kind of scrambling to make up new rules that they've never thought of. But obviously, I guess this goes without saying, everyone's doing it. You have to be really informed, and one of the things you should really make sure you're informed about is the possibilities of reduced staff and not just having all or nothing, because that's going to determine your possible opening time. Because again, maybe the government says you can open tomorrow, but you have no occupancy and you might have a walk-in. But the thing is, you need to know, when is my availability back online in order to accept reservations and then be able to be open for those reservations. If all of a sudden you need to cover the costs of 15 staff members instead of just being able to hire or to return back one or two, that's going to be a determining factor of when you want to reopen and put your availability back online and communicate that you're open again. And
but the thing is that if I took this, if I did agreement with the government that if I ask for the layoff of the staff, I cannot fire anyone. The thing is that we work a lot. Half of the staff was with contract de trabalho. How do you say it? Like working
contract,
and with that had an end date. So all those that had an end date, I had to let them go. With a promise that if I need them, I would ask them back. But for the moment, I had to let them go.
Of course, but like, I mean, aside from letting people go or not, if you're able to reintroduce them little by little, then, you know, like, it's not necessarily a question of whether you're able to fire them or not. That's a different conversation. But what I mean is, let's say in August, you could be back to 80%. I really wish. But if you were able to, then you need to know how to limit your costs until you get there to August, not just open up the 1st of June or whatever, with all of your staff members waiting for August to come when you have 80% occupancy. If you can reintroduce little by little, it's something that you should be looking into and talking with the government. Majo has his hand up. I think I pronounced that right. If you want to unmute yourself, Majo.
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to ask Benedita, where are you?
Lisbon, Portugal.
Lisbon. Yeah, Cantagua. I'm from Cantagua Hostel. We are in Spain, in Valencia. And it's kind of the similar situation. We can put our staff into this government help to pay the basic wages, but we have to keep them with us for 6 months after we reopen. And I asked if we could start having them little by little, and for now, the answer was no, but really there's no information about that. So for us, I was just making numbers, and I think it's better for the government to don't let us open right away because of the tourism. The tourism in Spain is not going to be open for a while. That's what we think is going to happen. So at the end, if the government is willing, the help is supposed to be during the time we cannot be open. So if the government let us stay closed, like make us stay closed for a longer time, that would be better in order for the world to start getting a little bit open bound.
Yeah, I really hope that the government doesn't blindly expect people to be able to reopen and get out of this emergency situation right away. I think, again, they're taking steps one at a time. Like I'm self-employed, and I keep I'm on the phone with my my accountant all the time, because it's like, okay, well, it seems like now they're looking at this, and now they're going to do this, and they're going to communicate something about that. As people protest, they're making they're starting to think about the concepts and introducing them. So I think, definitely, I hope that the government. We have huge hotel brands and companies that are attacking them about tourism. And I think I hope they'll know that you can't just go from 0 to 100 with business and just be open right away.
Here in Portugal, what they are talking about is they are opening hotels in the beach and in the country, but not in the big cities. And then on the second time, maybe they are reopen them in the big cities. But until July, they already said, and in July they'll start opening in the country, but not in the cities.
Yeah, I think that's more of like measures to, again, curb the infection rate, I would imagine. But when your hostel when your property is able to be reopened, they will need to take into consideration that you can't just like, if you're in this emergency situation that they've helped you get into, they've said, okay, like we realize you can't pay all your staff for all these months that you're closed.
That's right.
I don't think they can just suddenly say, okay, well, now you can be open, so good luck. I really don't think that's going to be the case, hopefully. Majo, don't worry, I'll be coming to Valencia to visit you as soon as I'm out of quarantine.
Thank you.
And do we have another raised hand, Lorenzo?
Yeah, are you listening? Great. So, Lorenzo from Portugal. First thing, very, very important. Leo said the other time that when we have a good news, we need to say it. So, first group for November, it's already in my system. So, hopefully, it's gonna be good. In Portugal, we are not. Yeah.
Lorenzo?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Okay.
You said in Portugal we are not?
In Portugal, most of the places are still closed, and there was one thing that Benedito was saying that, in my understanding, but I'm not the owner, so at the moment most of us are currently in layoff. Okay, I am in a 50% layoff. Okay, so basically the company is paying total in half of my wage, and then the other half I am cutted of 1/3 of the other half, so I am cutted of 1/6, and that in that part the government helps. Okay, so eventually that's going to be also possible to do with the other staff when the hostels reopen. I don't know, because in my opinion it's not very clear yet, so we don't know that much how it's going to happen.
Yeah, for the moment, the thing is that the government said layoff is at the most for 3 months. So they haven't decided. Layoff started in April, so there's still 1 month gone. So they have another 2 months to decide what they are going to do. So
yeah.
But
changing. Although, like you said, it depends on what people ask and what people protest and whatever.
let's see, because in my opinion there's one thing which is what's the truth for today, it's not the truth of tomorrow, so let's see.
But the thing that happened, that some of the hostels in Portugal went together and they decided to reactivate the association of Portuguese hostels, and they'll try to be present at the negotiations with the government and explain to them exactly what the hostel is, and make them understand what really it means and what the needs are for a hostel.
I'd be very careful with that. Again, we talked about this last week, but raising your hand saying like, yeah, I'm a communal hostel and we are awesome and we have shared kitchens and we share dorms.
Yeah, but we were talking about, we seriously talked about it, and we're going to have a meeting next week, and like, better not to talk anything about hostels. But the thing is that this week there was a big problem with a hostel in Lisbon, where there were around 230 immigrants, like Africans and whatever, inside the hostel. They named it hostel, although it's, I don't know if it is a hostel, and 130 of that had coronavirus. So it was a big scandal everywhere on TV and newspapers, and they were talking about it. So there is no chance that government is not taking notice of it. So we decided that it would be better.
Yeah.
To review.
Yeah, in that case, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely we need to take into consideration the limitations, the help that the government are going to give us in basing our decision of when we will reopen, not just if we're able to reopen. I just want to pose the question to people out there, what are you doing with your availability and why? Do you have it completely closed and just waiting for notice? Do you have it open as a certain date because you hope that's when you're going to be open? Again, the situation is if you are able, best case scenario, if you're able to open in 2 weeks from now, in a month from now, and tourism, whether it be local or family or whatever, comes back to you, you might be losing potential reservations or visibility by being closed. So how are you managing that, and what tips do you have for people?
So, Lear, one of the things, and actually, even today, I was talking with my manager about how we are going to reopen, because it's not even the part of reopen. It's how is it going to be, okay? With which measures, how we are going to make it, and eventually one of the ways it's going to be like cutting the occupancy by half, okay, and having only half of the dorms or something like that, like not using the top beds, as I said the other week, for example. It's one of the ways, uh, even if it's not going to be mandatory by the government. Eventually we are going to try to do it, okay, because one of the things that our direction board said was that 2020, it's not the year to sell beds, okay? It's the year to be safe, okay, and to try to maintain the business and try to don't have a huge breakdown of the business. And then 2021, let's see. In my opinion, there's always one thing, which is you will never have 100% occupancy, okay, in 2020, I would say. Maybe December, I don't know, maybe with groups, hopefully, but solo travelers and travelers, at least for example for Portugal at this moment, it's going to be a little bit impossible. Half of them, they actually cannot come, so even if they want. Another thing is the part of the breakfast. We are planning to do packaged breakfast instead of buffet. And that's it.
I'm just going to make a comment on the not using the top bed. I assume that's for social distancing and not for preference of bottom bunk, but you're probably trying to hit both at the same time. But take into consideration that if you're going to do this kind of social distancing, whether it's forced or by your own accord, it's actually more distance if you alternate between bottom and top bunk. Not because of the people that are in front of each other, but the people, if you have two beds side by side, you actually have more space if you have one on top, one on the bottom of the other bed. Just keep that in mind. So maybe it's a great concept, but I wouldn't necessarily just say bottom bunks and that's it. There might be some other system that's more appropriate. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that 2020 is going to be a horrible year. although for many businesses out there and small independent hostels, it is about selling beds as much as we can in order to sustain the business, like you said, sustaining the business.
Don't close the business, of course.
Yeah. But yeah, we definitely need to take into consideration all these things, do what we can to limit the amount of contact with the virus, because I mean, it won't, I don't think it'll be a matter of not getting infected. It'll be a matter of when we get infected and by how much contact we have with the virus until there is a vaccine, which will not happen anytime soon. But yeah, so I think we definitely need to take measures, make people feel safe, but at the same time, not at the, sorry, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I would personally not do it at the cost of my business, as long as it is safe. Like if I'm actually putting people at risk of dying, that's completely different. But if it's just, yeah, in that case, if you want absolutely no risk and we need to be safe, then the hostel would just be closed until the virus doesn't exist anymore, which is not feasible for the world economy and for ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's important to keep in mind. Definitely do take all the steps that you can. But I remember I had a conversation with one hostel that was limiting themselves to 50% occupancy when all this started because they wanted to show and give safety, but they were turning people away. And my thought was like, okay, I understand it's good to have a sense of security. It's good to limit the amount of exposure to the virus. It's a social responsibility that you're taking. But if your business is going to be closed or failing for the next year, I just personally couldn't understand limiting the amount of, I mean, I'm not saying put in more beds in the room and, you know, like pile in as many people as possible, but do what you can to be able to accept as many travelers as you can. Hopefully we'll be in a situation where we're worried about that and not just worried about getting any reservations. Glad to hear about the group, by the way. Okay, so.
But eventually, for example, here, one of our plans is to, at the moment, having 50% open to sell, okay? And then we will check, of course. Also because, for example, friends that are traveling together, they can and they will be on the same bunk bed, for example. But eventually, like, and we do have huge social areas, we need to check if it's possible to close them or not, and if we can do like timetables, schedules for the use of them.
I think it's not my computer and you're cutting out. Is that correct, everybody? Yeah, you kind of cut out there, Lorenzo, at the end. But I got what you're saying. I mean, it's completely fine to limit your availability online when you don't have the demand for it anyways. One could also argue to limit the demand by rooms to save on costs, especially if you're closing down a certain floor of the hostel. So instead of having 50% occupancy spread out throughout every room of the hostel, you could maybe have 50% occupancy with hopefully 50% occupancy, but with less rooms open, or maybe a floor that's open that's going to help you reduce your costs. I'm not saying to do that, but that is something to take into consideration. It's the balance of safety and awareness, and also being able to maintain your business afloat with limiting your costs. Anybody else? Or I don't know if Beatrice wants to move on to a different.
No, I still wanted to see to talk a bit more. About if people have their availability for the future or not, or if they just have their availability completely closed.
Raise your hand who has availability open in May. Jason's open, but he can't speak. Jason, I'll unmute you and see if you can speak. Can you say something? No, something's wrong with your mic, I think. Anyway, but Jason's open in Las Vegas.
Even Linda have availability as well for May.
Okay. And so people have your availability open for May. Are you getting any reservations? Does it even matter if you have your availability open? Go ahead, Linda.
Hi there.
Hey.
Yeah, we have our availability open. We didn't close it, but we have just a handful of reservations. Oh, I'm Linda and Steve from the Beehive in Rome. So yes, we have like a handful of reservations for May, but they're not going to happen. They're not going to happen.
No,
But are these
They're going to cancel.
Are these new reservations that have come in, or reservations that you already have and
No.
haven't canceled yet?
No, they're
No,
reservations.
we have no new reservations. We
Okay.
have no new reservations.
But they're reservations that you're hoping might not cancel and you will be able to open.
No, we're actually not hoping that because
Okay.
we're not really in any hurry to reopen. I mean, we know that the first thing is going to be what Italy as a country decides to do and what kind of restrictions they're going to put on everybody. And, we're going to have to do all kinds of, like sanification, and we're going to have to buy all kinds of equipment. And, there's been talk even of putting up like plexiglass panels between staff and everything. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is going to be costly and difficult to do, and is pointless to do if it's still empty. So the first thing is what the government is going to allow and what kind of restrictions they're going to put on us. And then the second thing is whether there'll be any market, because borders are still closed. Our market is maybe 80-90% foreigners, and nobody's coming to Italy from outside of the EU. And that might be, they've been talking about not opening the borders until next March. And I know the EU has been saying maybe September. So it could be many months before people are actually able to come from outside the EU without being in quarantine anyway, right?
Sorry, Steve, did you say they're thinking of not opening the borders in Europe until next March, 1 year away?
Well, Italy is thinking of not reopening its borders until March. But by that, like right now, technically the border is open. You can come, but you have to be able to declare before your departure in another country that you're repatriating, or like you can't come here as a tourist. The border is open under certain circumstances. If you're coming here for work, if you're coming here for, coming home and you're a resident here, but you can't just come here as a visitor right now. And that might remain in place until next March. So no matter what, even if like technically right now we can be open because our license is as a hotel, and hotels weren't forced to close. So, technically we can be open. I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of restrictions. Like we have rooms with shared bath and we have dorm rooms, and I doubt that those will be allowed. I'm sure those won't be legal. I'm sure there'll be all kinds of things that we can't really adapt to very easily, or if at all. And then the debate is, even if we could at a huge expense, I mean, nobody's going to be coming. And once people do start coming, I doubt they're going to be choosing us, because there's going to be so much on the market at such cheap prices that I think people will stay in Airbnbs where they have their own kitchen, or they'll stay in fancy hotels that offer really cheap rates. So, I mean, we're actually thinking at some point, because it costs us more just to be open, we're going to see if we can just find a way around paying the minimal amount in rent for the year, or trying to suspend our involvement with the place and put in, long-term. I don't even think there's really going to be any long-term guests, because there's no universities people here. There's going to be a ton of apartments free, like little bed and breakfasts and things like that. So I don't think it'll be that easy even to get the digital nomad that needs a long-term stay. I think they'll be able to find an apartment for a better price. But we're just going to our plan is to just try and negotiate as little as we can for our rents, borrow a shitload of money from the government. Well, not from the government, from the banks, but with a guarantee from the government. And then, offset paying back those loans over the next 5 years or so with the losses that we've had this year, and just wing it. I mean, I don't.
So yeah, you're playing on the Antonio's strategy of hibernating, I think he called it.
Yeah.
Now our availability is open. So if reservations come in, you know, and we can accommodate them, then yeah, we'll accommodate them. And if that means moving them all into one area where we can keep the expenses, I mean, if we get reservations and they're worth it, then yeah, we'll deal with it. But we're not going to be open. No. We're not going to have staff and reception and the cafe and all this other stuff open, right? Because it'll be impossible.
Yeah, we wouldn't be fully operational. Yeah.
So Steve, just sorry to touch on the fact that you said that you don't think that people that are traveling will be staying and choosing hostels, rather they'll be choosing Airbnbs. It has been said in a few groups, and I've seen it, that it's kind of the data that's coming in is contradictory to that. The few reservations that hostels are seeing that have private rooms, I'm not saying all hostels, but the ones that I've heard of, are getting reservations in dorms, and actually in the largest, cheapest dorms. So yeah. So it's important to know that it's a great assumption that you're making. I would probably make the same assumption as well. However, be open to the fact that that assumption could be wrong. And this brings up a good debate of, for example, you said, if I get reservations that are worth it, then yeah, we can reopen. Now, there's a good thing about pricing. So in order for it to be worth it for you, it'd be fine to get maybe 10 people in your house that are paying 20, 25 euros, but you're not able to charge that. So it's like, do you keep your prices high in order to see if it's worth you opening, or do you lower the prices and then have to accommodate the people with those prices? Because you don't know the potential of your new the new demand, because we don't know the demand that's coming in yet. But that's where I said, I think last week, is we really have to be day to day on the results that we're getting once we start getting them. And we need to see what the demand is in the market and how to react to that demand with the prices or with your, with your strategies. So yeah,
I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want to say, I mean, I think it's valuable to try and be ready, even though it's impossible to know what's going to happen. So to just, as a mental exercise, to think, if this happens, this could be our response. And if this happens, this could be our response. But, our experience of how we got into this business in the first place, and how the place has changed and adapted to market changes over the last, 2 decades, has always been a matter of, we respond to what we see people want and what we see people need, right? And in fact, even existing as a hostel was from the very beginning was all about that. It was about trying to create some sort of alternative to what existed, right? So, I mean, the way we feel is, right now we have no idea what people are going to want, and what people will even be able to travel, whether people from the US will even be able to come here for quite a while. Whether there's also the possibility, and I think it's greater than a possibility right now, of people going in, the world going into a huge recession and people not having any money, and that could work in our favor, and it could also work to our detriment. We also have a market in Rome that's just really saturated, and there's a lot of apartments, and there's a lot of things, and it's very difficult when there's a lot of empty rooms and empty apartments for anybody to compete, because there's a lot of stuff on offer there. But our attitude and our recommendation to everybody else is just wait and see. And if people are requesting 10-bed dorms, then why would you limit that? If that's what people want, then give it to them. If people want privates, then, at the last minute, everything's a private. I mean, I don't think that it even takes that much planning in advance. Once the reservations start to come in, I mean, we've even had times where we've converted rooms, the morning of, whether it's making it, setting up a bunk bed or taking one away. I mean, we're all small and scrappy and capable of doing that. So, I mean, that's going to be our approach for sure.
Right. So really important to know with the wait and see, it kind of ties in with what I was saying of, we have to be able to analyze the demand that's coming back and the segmentations that are coming back, but we will never be able to know what we don't know based on our own hostel. For example, if you price, just like I said, if you price at 25 euros, and you see there's no reservations coming in, that doesn't necessarily mean that you would know what the reaction of the market would be if you were at €5. And I'm not saying to be at €5, but you can only really see what's happening with how people are reacting to what you're offering in your location. And so we really need to be up, and hostels, I think, really now need to step up the game in benchmarking and being able to look outwards and see what's happening in the market to be able to look at that opportunity and capitalize on it. Whether it's lowering the prices or whether it's dorms are okay, they're not okay, in which state, what segmentation's coming back. Is it families? Is it friends? Is it digital nomads? You don't know if you're not reaching that target audience and catering for them, right? So, but if you see that they are coming back to the market, then you can take action. So we really need to start benchmarking, which is, I think, a simple way to do that are these calls. Have these calls even within your own market. We talked about the importance of having a WhatsApp group in your own country or your own city. Like talk to each other and get information so that you have a better idea of what is happening as it starts happening. Yeah, I think like using also data that's out there for you to look at to see about the demand in the city, the pricing. Like there's definitely tools out there that will help you. I'll see maybe if next week we can start touching on some of those, and like if people need to know a little bit more on how to benchmark and how to look at the data that's out there for the market. I think that's important. All right.
All right, so let's move on to the interesting part of this call, which is actually, as I said in the beginning, try to foresee all the possibilities for the future in your hostel and your market, and plan for them as best as possible. So I'd like for you guys to share what in your case, what is the worst case scenario that you foresee for your hostel and your market, and how should you prepare for it? What should you do? What are you able to do? Don't be shy.
Worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario.
Luba's coming in. Luba's coming in with a worst case scenario.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna come with because I like being very pessimistic.
Luba, make sure you introduce yourself so people know where you're from.
Yeah. So I'm from Russia. Our hostel is in St. Petersburg. It's called Soul Kitchen. We have 100 beds, and we are completely closed for 1 month now. So we have a constant debate right now with my partner and my manager about what are we supposed to do in future. And my role is being the pessimistic man, and my partner will be on the optimistic side, I guess. And I truly don't believe that there will be a lot of international travel going on within the next year for sure. And the second year will be like something at least coming up, but I think that realistically in 3 years we can see something similar with which was in the past, but also in a new level. Like people are going to probably travel longer. That's what I think personally, which is mostly a pessimistic way, but for me it sounds more like a realistic one. And for the strategies, if it comes to be a best scenario is to transform for a long stay. And that is something that I already brought here, I think last session, about the idea of turning into the space for the long term, which is of course a complete different kind of economy. But we all understand that we're not going to earn as much as we did. And offering a place for a long-term stay, I think long-term, I mean, in terms of how that is going to be a sustainable idea for a couple of years, I think it is definitely more sustainable than a hostel. It also depends on when, of course, I mean, where you are in the city or a little bit out, or which location, more in the nature or not. But being in Russia, I think there is also a problem of having not a lot of trust to the healthcare of the country. So once you even allowed to travel, and now in Russia they're going to have, they're discussing now to have a really easy electronic visa for all the foreigners to stay 2 weeks. So the process of getting the visa is going to be really easy. But again, I don't think there will be a lot of trust, because in case the virus is going to happen again and nobody's going to be guaranteed, they would better prefer to go to Germany, for example, where they know that the death rate is much lower. They probably won't go to Russia right now. So it's also one of the things. And yeah, what to do with the huge space is a big question. And other than staying with the long term and really reformatting, not just saying that we're going to have people staying like in the same facilities but the long term, but actually rethinking the whole subject, like different kind of activities, different kind of guests, different kind of staff, different kind of check in and check out, and all everything, different platforms to market, different ways of marketing. And I don't know, some people are really not happy with the idea that the economy is going to change, never going to be the same. I mean, of course, at some point it is not going to be much different, but at the same time it will. And a lot of habits are going to change, and some people are going to be fine with staying in the dorm, but a lot of them not. And maybe it's good to have some big questionnaire. I don't know, I have maybe a quick idea that if we all going to send a little quiz to all of our guests about what they think about traveling in future, whether they would prefer staying in a private room or in the shared dorm, for example. Like together we have a lot of guests, so maybe we can have some relevant temperature in the market, but maybe not now, a little later, because still everything is so unknown. But for the future, I think it's something interesting to figure out and to see where we can go.
About the long term, when you say long term, what do you mean? Over how long?
Up from 2 weeks, 1 month or more.
Okay, I just
a year.
Because I kind of foresee something. I'm not sure if it will happen, but I'm going to foresee that Airbnbs will also struggle, because there's a huge amount of offer of Airbnbs. I guess depends on the location, but I think it's a topic everyone's been talking about, how hostels were at risk before, because now there's so many Airbnbs. So it's kind of known that there's so many Airbnb properties out there.
The Airbnb are going to move towards a very long stay, like 1 year.
Exactly. But well, no, I think there will be so much more offer of these empty houses that are not like, now it's not more advantageous to sell for a short term at, you know, like 30, 50 euros a night. And I don't think it's going to be convenient for them to sell at 10 euros a night. So they'll probably just start renting again. And so I think there'll be so much more rental properties available that it will bring the rental price down. And I don't know if people will choose, again, we don't know until we see it, but I don't know if people will choose staying at a hostel for, let's say, 400 euros a month than getting their own apartment for 300 euros a month. You know, I
but that's why there are people who are staying at the hostels because they like staying at the hostels. There are people who like staying at the co-living, though they can afford staying somewhere else, because they can meet like-minded people. So that is a lot of work. And as I said, it's not just like you go in to open the doors and say that now people can stay long-term and they're going to have a special deal. It's totally not about that. It's like, I don't know, I'm going to host only I don't know, IT developers, web developers or something like that, because I am doing that myself, for example. Or I'm going to host only artists or only photographers, and they can be surrounded with the same kind of people, I don't know, photographers and models, something like that. You could, I mean, we have to be really creative for survival. And then on top of that, you're going to offer them, just like we do, just like we always did, the experience. So that's how we can stand out from the Airbnb and all the other offers, that they might pay, if they still have a little money left, for the experience and choose to stay with this reformat of hostel, which is more like a co-living, other than somewhere else, because they know that it's going to be a really cool experience. They're going to know a lot of people. It's going to be really entertaining. They're going to learn a lot, which is not a thing in the hostel. It's not about educational. It is about traveling, having fun. But I think now it's going to be more on the educational side as well. So yes, like we should be really creative, I think.
Okay. Beatrice, if you can help me here, because I'm noticing there's some good chats going on about nomads, but I haven't really been able to process it. So
yeah, it's all covered. I've got that covered.
no, but I think maybe not everyone's reading the chat, so I think it's good to bring up digital nomads and anyone to share.
Yeah, basically, Marco asked if anybody knew of any way to reach out to digital nomads or communities for digital nomads, so for them to promote the hostel. So a lot of people talked about Facebook groups. There are a lot of Facebook groups for digital nomads.
Is it okay to just spam a Facebook group as a accommodation provider? Like, I don't know.
Sometimes you just need to talk to the administrators of the group and say, like, if sometimes they are creating a list of recommended accommodations that I'm sure digital nomads always search for. An example I also gave was that, for example, in Lisbon, there's a website that is dedicated to digital nomads, where they organize several events. They have like working Mondays where they all work from the same place. They have like a shitty comedy show as well. Like they organize stuff, and on their website they also have recommended accommodations. So if you find a website like this in your own city, just feel free to contact the
do you know, Beatrice?
website.
Sorry, do you know, Beatrice, if that's paid ads? Like when they have recommended accommodations, do you know if you have to pay for it?
I don't think so. These are like lists that they create. I know, yeah.
Yeah, every case will be different. Every Facebook group.
Exactly. And then also Gustavo talked about globeguru.com. I don't know this website.
Well, he's got his hand up. Maybe he wants to talk about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Gustavo?
Hello.
Hola.
Hi, can you all hear me?
I was Lorenzo with his hands
up.
Yeah. Hey.
Cool. So I'm Gustavo from Queen Hostel Milan. The website that I talk about, the Global Guru, I misunderstood the question. This one is more like a social travel platform where you can invite some, you can or create some promotions or invite travel person to come to your hostel and promote your hostel. So it's a little bit different. And they also have something, they contact me last year. I don't know if they are working or not yet, but they also have something about a platform to introduce some digital nomads in this platform, but I don't know if they are doing it yet or not. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
I don't know if you can see it, Beatrice, but Lorenzo has his hand up. Do you see when people put up their hands?
No, I can see. I was in the bottom of the list. Go ahead, Lorenzo.
So yeah, so Beatrice, for example, in my hostel, sometimes we do have nomad X events and things like that. Okay, actually they contacted us. It was not our contact to them, but basically it doesn't work with the commission based, at least these days. Basically sometimes they do parties in our hostel, and then a lot of people take pictures. It does go viral a lot, and actually there are always people that want to stay in our hostel for a while.
All right, Lorenzo, for next time, you need to work on your connection. I think it has coronavirus or something. All right, Beatrice, next point.
Yeah,
Or...
I don't know if there are any more pessimists out there for the worst case scenario.
Well, I think something that people really should consider is the possibility of just start maybe mapping it out, but how many rooms do you have, whether they're en suite or not? If you were to have only one person in there on a short-term or a long-term basis, would it be, and at what price would it be able to cover your costs, limiting your costs as much as possible? So I think worst case scenario is your hostel goes bankrupt, unfortunately. But worst case scenario, one of the worst case scenarios would be that you're only allowed to have one person per room. And so I know there's many hostels with 3 rooms with 10 beds in each. So that would be a huge loss for them. There's also many hostels that have 12 4-bed dorms. So that won't impact them as much. But think of what do I need to charge in order to break even, having one person in a room at 100% occupancy throughout the month. And just even to see if that is something that you can take into consideration, at what price would you have to charge? And if that is the case, how do you find people that would stay for long-term in this kind of like co-living, but being in their own room as you may be forced to do that? Just something to take into consideration and do the math in your own property, I think.
There is always the problem with the shared bathroom.
Yeah, but again, we don't know if they're going to limit and say like, okay, well, you cannot rent any rooms that have a shared bathroom. I don't think they will do that. You'll have to have your own measures for cleaning and stuff like that. But I don't know if they will just blank out limit any accommodation providing a room that does not have a private bathroom. It's possible, of course, but I think if anything, if they're going to put limitations, it's going to be about the room itself. I don't even think they'll worry about the shared kitchen. Again, every country, yeah, we never know, and every country is going to be different, and every situation is going to be different. But I would assume, in overall, my common sense would tell me that if they're going to put a limit, if they do look at hostels, they're going to look that it's a shared facility, and if they put measures of distancing in place, I think the easiest way to do that is just like one person can stay in a room. So I think that's a big possibility that's going to come out there. Not necessarily 50% occupancy in each room. I think it'll just be like rooms have to be private if they're looking at hostels and then giving us that limitation. So it's something you should consider and look into. Also, maybe if the government doesn't limit it, but let's say we see that, yeah, like Luba said, people are looking for long-term accommodation. That's pretty much my only possibility is to reach out to them. And they do appreciate a hostel experience and might not go for an Airbnb. So they might be willing to come to you. So if you have that limitation, or if that's the only kind of option that you have, it's just good to kind of, again, it's about running scenarios to be prepared. So if you run the scenario of having rooms only be occupied by one person, I think it'd be good to do that math and also think about how to cut back your services so that these long terms, like, do they need to have free breakfast every day? If so, how? Do they need to have all the services that you've always been offering to people? So how will your business kind of change if you're adapting yourself to long terms? And how can you limit?
Sorry, so just something to add on top of what I said. Most of the co-livings, they come together with full board meals. So if there is an option to prepare food for them, that can be something to add on, because then you can charge more and you can have a more value and an interesting offer, because that can be, let's say, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, maybe even communal if that can be possible, or in their rooms. But for the digital nomads who work a lot, they really don't want to take care about the food. So if it's possible for you to do that, or maybe outsource that, so you can have an offer for them that's not only about accommodation, it's also about experience, networking, with the food included and with the facilities included, like a co-working place, for example. So Like ideally, I would demolish one of my biggest room and I would just put desks there. And that will be something that is going to facilitate them perfectly, I hope. And that's what they can pay a little more than a regular apartment or something like that. They will actually see the real value there.
Yeah, I think actually the cost cutting that you could have with long-term stays more is about your staff if you're able to cut those costs. But because you won't be having check-in, check-out every day of 100 people, you'll be having 10 rooms occupied with long-term stays. So whether you have volunteers or a live-in manager, maybe there's a way of cost cutting there. Again, if you can do that. Some people can't get rid of their staff. So no, yeah.
There's Camille with her hand raised. So feel free to unmute yourself and
go ahead.
Hi. From most of you people, because I was about to open a hostel. So my place is not open yet, but I was supposed to open in June. So we are changing a bit our plans, and I think it's interesting questions because we are also thinking about how we are going to manage our hostel in case we have some restrictions, especially for the dorms. And so we have been developing different scenarios. So hopefully, I would say in the place we are opening the hostel, which is in Bretagne, in Rennes, so it's not in Paris, we have already identified that we would have less demand for dorms than, for example, in Paris, because the demand is more oriented to private rooms. So we only have 60% of our total availability that is in dorms. And we have built different scenarios where we would put all our dorms into co-living or permanent or long-term, let's say, locations. And we have defined the minimum rate we should have to be enough competitive to compete with, for example, with Airbnb or stuff. And we have, for example, we know that in France we should have a 550 euros per month minimum, yes, let's say, to cover our different costs. But this would be only possible for, let's say, for the first year, or let's say the time we had these restrictions, because in the meantime we will still have the rest of the hostel, which is in the hostel mode, mean that we will have to pay the people for the service, and we have the same direct cost that we'll maintain. And so it's complicated to have the correct balance. But what I mean is that I think changing the dorms into a co-living or let's say one person per room is possible, I think, in some business. Of course, it depends on the different countries and restrictions and will they have. But I know that in France, that's something we consider for when we start. But that's also possible because in our first, let's say, business plan, the first year, we would expect a ramp up that is not that big. So that's why we think it's realistic to have this kind of thing. But we expect also in France that they will put restrictions to shared places such as dorms. We believe that hotels would be okay, but shared place is going to be complicated. So that's just to share a bit about what we think we're going to do. So
what a horrible time to join the hostel community. But
yeah,
welcome. Good to have you.
Yeah.
All right. Beatrice, we have about 10 minutes left, so I don't know if there's some...
I just want to make one more question, just so we talked about the worst case scenario. So I actually want to go now for the best case scenario. I know most of you will say like, oh, maybe like open and it be 100% full, but still you'll have things to do. You'll have things to plan for that case as well. So do you have your staff ready to go? If you open with 100% occupancy, do you have all your staff ready to go? Do you have already security measures and plano de contingência? Lior, plano de contingência. Plano de contingência in English.
I don't know what that is.
Like a health
contingency. Contingency plan?
Contingency plan, security plan, in place in your hostel.
Well, we always end on a good note, so that's why we're talking about the best case scenario of being at 100% occupancy. Everyone's ready for that? Everyone's ready for that, or? No, but it is something to take into consideration. Maybe something will happen that we get a higher occupancy. I mean, I hate to say it, but maybe in your market, you're going to have a lot of failing hostels that are shutting down, or people that choose to hibernate and choose not to reopen, having their own difficulties. So, I mean, best case scenario for you is if you're the only hostel left and you still have a demand in your dorms and you're at 100% occupancy. It's a possibility. So just, is there anything that's getting in our way of going back to 100% right away? Does anyone have anything that they would have to iron out? Staff's all ready to go again. Everything's ready and set. Okay, so let's go for that, 100% occupancy.
All the stuff that is at home that we have to let go, they won't find another place to work now. So they will have to, well, I told them if I'm going to reopen, when I'm going to reopen, as soon as I need more staff, I'm definitely going to call you back, but because they won't find any other job now. So I hope that they will be there when I have to open if I need them.
Well, I guess, I mean, but being ready for 100% occupancy goes beyond just the staff. It goes back to these measures of, are we ready to go back to having full dorms, people partying at the bar, even if it's allowed, you know, are we ready to do that? Maybe putting people at risk of increasing their contact and viral load. And so that also needs to think about, if you have the potential of being at 100%, what do we do with that, right? Pam has her hand up, so I'll let her speak.
Hi again. Again, maybe I can't offer much help to other ones. I don't know how many of you function the same as we at Swanky, but just to give our 2 cents about this. Are we ready? God forbid that happens. We are ready because, as I said already, our staff is here. We're all eager to work. That's number one. Number two, we already keep doing, just to keep the volunteers and the place busy, and hopefully this positive mindset manifests. We actually do like general cleaning of the rooms. We have our handyman. He was like the only one still working at some point after the earthquake. I don't know if I mentioned one time we had an earthquake today, this morning, another one, 3.5. So, but we already fixed the little damage, like fortunately that we had. We're literally last 3 days, we're like repainting the terrace, the rooms, the toilets. Like literally now we're doing what maybe we would be done like a month ago or something, polishing the place, right? For the start, we are lucky to have 3 studio apartments and 10 private rooms. Some private rooms get to from 1 to maximum 4 people. All have private bathrooms. The studios, of course, have the small kitchen. That's kind of what we've been doing now with the people that are stuck. And for now, what's open, like talking back to availability, that's how we're starting actually, because we have that luxury of half the hostel actually being private. The good part also is that both of those wings of private rooms are actually separate wings. So they have their own entrance. And that's how we're starting. Then the dorms, it's a whole other story if that happens, but we are basically, everything is polished, cleaned, saved. We have disinfecting 4 different kinds. Since like 2 months ago, we've been starting doing that, measuring temperatures, looking at our guests. We have WhatsApp group, Swanky Quarantine. They can send us, like, if you don't want your room maybe to be cleaned by us, we can provide you with stuff. You make your own beds and stuff like that. So we are ready if a wonder happens, basically.
Awesome. Here's hoping for that.
I really like the WhatsApp group idea of Swanky Quarantine. I think that's an amazing idea. And yeah, this is exactly what we're talking about, is when you open, do you have systems in place? Do you have things thought out for every possible scenario? So it's a good time to have that thought out, so then when the situation comes, you don't have to stop and waste time thinking about what you're going to do next. So you already have everything thought out beforehand. So what is the worst possible scenario? How will you react to it? How will you know it's the worst possible scenario? The best case scenario, how will you react to it? Because even if you're 100%, there are things to do and there are things that need to be implemented. And what's the, above all, the realistic scenario. And so this chat is actually to pass on that idea, that so you guys are prepared for any case. Leo, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I kind of want to contradict everything you say. No, because it's fun. I mean, we came up with this topic, and I now I'm starting to think, don't overthink it at the same time, and don't think about so many situations, because we don't know what's going to happen. But definitely, I think we thinking of 3 scenarios: the worst case, the realistic, the best case. Thinking about those situations. And then looking at possibilities as opportunities come up. But I mean, just worrying about every single possible case that could happen, just so you're ready for it. Obviously that's not possible, and it's just gonna cause us more headaches than we already have. Be informed about what's happening in your local markets, not just tourism coming back, but your government and their supports and what you're able to do. And then look at your situation on what you can do to adapt to those and be able to survive for as long as you can until things get back to normal. And did somebody just scream?
That's Maxime.
And that's it. So guys, it's been an hour and a half again. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you guys joining the call. It was nice talking to everybody. And until next week.
Yep.
All right.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.